Dear friends and fellow Earth citizens from about 140 countries around the world, this is such a beautiful reflection of humanity as one single organism. We're so happy that you will share this moment with us. And we are about to meet a very interesting group of foresighted leaders with very holistic views who will tell us and discuss how can we rise from the present crisis we're in to start living in harmony with new nature instead. My name is Annika Dopping and I'm from Sweden. And I would like to start by introducing the hosting organization of the discussion, namely the World Forum for Ethics in Business, and the managing director, Christoph Glaser. Please tell us about your forum.
Thank you so much, Annika. And it's good to see you all. That's right. So the World Forum for Ethics in Business has been founded by Sri Sri Ravi Shankar back in 2006 and holds ever since annual conferences in the European Parliament, and since 2010 also conferences around the globe.
And what is it more specifically that you do in your daily work?
You know, bringing good governance to the world is surely a technical challenge. We need structures, we need systems in place, but we have come to understand that it's even more importantly an adaptive challenge. It's a question of mindset, it's a question of culture. And Peter Drucker famously said that the best strategy can be eaten by culture for breakfast. So the question is, how can we make sure that the people do the right thing even if nobody is watching? And I think Sri Sri Ravi Shankar's inspirational leadership has really led the way in that regard.
And can you tell that the yearning for learning about good governance, is it growing, would you say, around the globe?
You know, we believe that leadership starts where the knowledge ends. And I think in this COVID-19, in this global crisis, we have come to a scenario where we really don't know the way. This is new for all of us. And what do we do then? I think that's when insight, when mindfulness, when true connection to oneself and the other is most important. And Sri Sri Ravi Shankar lives and shares these values like none other.
We all have seeds within that can be cultivated for us to bloom more as leaders, responsible leaders.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Christoph Glaser, for hosting this important meeting today. And we continue with the president of your organization, Ms. Rajita Kulkarni in India.
Hello.
I can't say welcome to you. You say welcome to me, but please tell, you must be so proud of this, all these meetings taking place right now.
Absolutely, Annika. I think in a way this pandemic has compelled us to disrupt the way we live our lives, to innovate in the way we connect with each other. And I think it has shown us unprecedented ways in which we can come together as a global community. So I would really like to start by thanking our colleagues in Sweden, Pia Landenpera, and others who have helped facilitate this panel today. And also our very senior trainer and leader of the Art of Living organization, Swami Jyotirmay in Europe, who has helped us facilitate today. So we are very happy. This is in a series of panels that and think tank conversations we have been having on different subjects convened by the World Forum for Ethics in Business.
And I know that Sri Sri Ravi Shankar has shown and demonstrated with a platform created by you that organizations can learn that they don't have to choose between being ethical or profitable. Actually, you can do both. It's even a competitive advantage to act ethically in the long term. And what can you tell us about your actions around climate change?
Absolutely. I think you said it right. And in that, I personally take inspiration from Sri Sri Ravi Shankar, because in the way his organizations, our organizations are run around the world, are in full compliance of the ethical standards of the country, of the regulators there, and at the same time growing in a very sustainable way to make a tangible impact to the communities. And that is where we are, propelling our actions forward. In fact, the discussion about sustainability, the discussion about caring for our planet has come to the forefront in the past decade or so in a big way. But if I look back on some of the efforts which, Shri Shri is online with us, and it is a matter of great pride for me to share some of the work that has been envisioned and guided by him. I think almost 4 decades, since 4 decades now, because caring for the planet, nurturing nurturing our planet is actually quite intrinsic to so many of our cultures around the world. And the Art of Living Foundation, founded by Shri Shri, also the International Association for Human Values, both international organizations and us as the World Forum, I think have been united in our efforts. So if you just look at some of the numbers, Anika, they are quite staggering. Like in the past 3 decades or so, the volunteers, and all of this work has been driven by volunteers. So the volunteers have planted more than 81 million trees. Can you imagine? In around the world, 81 million trees. And this year we have taken a resolution, earlier this year, in fact, in February, to launch a program called Mission Green Earth, where we have taken a global pledge to plant and nourish and nurture 5 million trees in the next 5 years. So in increasing the green cover, I think the effort has been on since 4 decades. In fact, I'm also associated with Shri Shri's university, where we transformed like a barren piece of 200 acres of land from 2 trees to 100,000 trees, making it a green campus and a community for flora, fauna, and birds of all types. So in action and in vision, I think the work has been going on. Also, the work on natural resources conservation, Anika, has been a big effort. I don't want to talk too much because I'm sure Shri Shri will guide us more on that. But in just the last 3-4 years in India alone, more than 46 rivers have got rejuvenated, which means that rivers which had completely dried, with water tables going very deep below and riverbeds drying out, have got rejuvenated with almost 250 million liters of water now back for use to more than 7 million people across about 7,000 villages. So these are staggering numbers, and we are very grateful that Shri Shri is really, I think he leads from the front in that. Gurudev, please pardon me, I am saying in front of you. And we should hear more from him about how he does that and inspires millions of volunteers in that direction.
It's amazing with the spread and the results of all you're doing around the world. Actually, I'm hearing how you take care of the elements. You purify the water, you take care of the soil, you take care of the air and energy as well, I know, with solar energy. So you're really around the planet with tremendous power from all the volunteers. Thank you so much, Rajita, for telling us. And
Thank
good
you.
luck in the future with that. And then we turn to the founder of all this, not only these 2 organizations that Ms. Kulkarni mentioned, but also the Art of Living Foundation. Congratulations to you, Shri Shri, for all the manifestations of your extremely powerful visions. Are you proud?
I am very grateful for the volunteers. Actually, the volunteers who does this whole work, and they are highly inspired. I got inspired by Mahatma Gandhi when I was young, because my grandfather lived with Mahatma Gandhi in his ashram. So my father also, So my father was also a big fan of Mahatma Gandhi. So from that, I think what work he has done, Mahatma Gandhi did, what we are doing is, when you compare, it's nothing. It's just a drop in the ocean. And today, with all the facilities, we need to do more. And especially save the planet Earth, And so, the very principle, you be the change you want to bring, is what Mahatma Gandhi have always said. So we just adopted that one sentence: you want to bring the change, let us start from where we are. So we started in a small way 40 years ago with very little resources. But then, when there is clarity in mind and purity in heart, and you are sincere in your action, nature simply supports. So people, because the world is full of good people, I would say, if you see through my eyes, I would say there is good people everywhere on the planet. Everyone want to do something good to the planet Earth. And so that goodness have manifested in rejuvenating many rivers, which were just only in the revenue records. They were not there on the ground. It was all dried up, and sand mafias had removed the sand, and it was in a bad shape. But it is the collective effort of all the volunteers who are deeply inspired, and things are possible. But this COVID-19, in a very strange way, has made the nature rejuvenate itself. Some of the rivers, they never had such pure water in India. For example, the Ganges water, which more than several $billions have been spent by the government to clean it. It didn't work. But this 40 days or 30 days of lockdown, I tell you, the river water have become purer. We could sight dolphins in Mumbai, which they had never seen. And the weather here in Bangalore, which I know only as a child, we never used fan, or we never had an air condition in this city. It was called an AC city, air conditioned city. It has returned to that weather now. For the first time in 50 years, I see the weather has become so good. I think we should have 1 week of lockdown in the whole world every year. On an Earth Day, we must celebrate. This should perhaps give the time for nature to rejuvenate herself. What do you say, Anika?
It's an excellent idea. Thank you so much, Rishi. It seems as if both humans and the planet, nature, has the innate ability to rejuvenate itself once we give the opportunity. Thank you so much for now. We will turn to our Scandinavian guests. And without for a second disregarding or ignoring the terrible suffering taking place in many, many ways now due to the pandemic, there is also a parallel truth that in every crisis is entailed an opportunity, a new beginning, an opportunity to start questioning strategies that might not longer be really serving us as we wished, or correcting imbalances or dysfunctional systems, and start with a new governance, as Christoph Glaser was talking about, in a wiser direction. So we would like to introduce our Scandinavian guests one at a time, where you present yourself and also mention one or two benefits that you can see from this involuntary slowdown in society. We would like to start with our youngest participant, a strong supporter of our world-famous Greta Thunberg, a young woman who is working every day to create a better future. Ms. Rebecca Lemoine.
Oh, is that me?
Okay.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Rebecca Lemoine. I'm a conservation biologist and also member of the Swedish Parliament for the Green Party. And although there is a social distancing now, I see people coming together in a strong solidarity. And I think in this crisis, I see people become less machine-like and more human, less stressed and more present. And I think this pandemic shows how vulnerable our society is. And many people are now debating how we must strengthen our resilience in all different ways, and also questioning our truths. So in a time when there is such need for a paradigm shift, this is important and much welcomed. So I think that is one of the kind of benefits from this, that this debate is now taking place.
Thank you, Rebecca. We continue with our most senior participant, a gentleman who has really experienced massively how real progress can stem out of the worst crisis. Mr. Jan Eliasson, welcome.
Thank you very much. Great to be with this group. I'm Jan Eliasson, working now with Stockholm International Peace Research Institute. Among other things, we are broadening the concept and understanding of security. Security in today's world is not only military and political. Security is dealing with climate change soundly, dealing with pandemics, and seeing security generally as something that in the end will affect human beings. And that is the basic philosophy we have to keep in mind now. I'm glad that you, Annika, pointed to the fact that we have a raging crisis, and we should think of all those who are dying and all those who are in grief and all those who don't have jobs and all that. So we should be able to deal with the present crisis, but at the same time, we must already think very carefully about the world after Corona. We should already today draw lessons. And lessons to be learned are very obvious, that we need to be much better prepared for crisis. We need to have a preventive strategy for what we do. We need to remind ourselves that we are all interdependent and that we need cooperation both inside countries and between countries, and that we also should revive the true sense of solidarity, caring for our fellow human beings, both in your own local community, but also internationally and globally. So I think we have a good discussion point here, namely, how do we build back better after Corona? We must build back a better society after the Corona crisis, but at the same time deal very energetically with the situation as it is now. Over to you.
Thank you so much for now. And we continue with a former colleague of yours from Norway, Mr. Erik Solheim.
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm Erik Solheim. I was a Norwegian minister and I was with the UN. I spent basically my entire adult life working on environment and development, as well as peace, and that's where I came to know and respect Shri. We worked together in the peace process in Sri Lanka, and we tried also jointly to do something in Nepal, and of course also with Jan Eliasson, I worked on different peace processes. So we are knowing each other for a long time, and I think there's a lot we can achieve together. At the moment, I'm mainly focusing on work with China. China, as you know, is by far now the biggest investor in many parts of the world. I think more than 100 nations have China as the #1 trading partner, and the Chinese Belt and Road Investment Initiative is by far the biggest in our time. So I'm working with the Chinese to see how that can be taken in a greener direction. Less coal, more solar, just to give one example. I mean, as Jan said, this crisis has shown the best and the worst of humanity. The worst is quarreling between nations and quarreling within nations. The best is the outburst of solidarity and dignity, basically everywhere, where people are really able to show the love and respect they have from others. It's great to see. Coming out of the crisis, I believe we need to focus on business. That's why this is a great initiative. Going into the crisis, business were changing quite a lot. Swedish IKEA and Microsoft, just an example, both promised to go renewable and promised to be carbon negative. And Nike has promised to source all their energy from renewables, and I can give any number of examples. But getting out of the crisis, we need to be much greener. And I'm very optimistic that we'll be able to see a lot more of a circular economy where we are using our resources much wiser. I mean, business overall has learned that they need to price risk much higher. The risk has not been taken into account by business in a proper way up to now. They will price risk much better, and they will understand that many of the value chains are vulnerable, and that will also make them go in a more circular direction. But also, overall, I think we'll see a huge move towards a circular economy, meaning less buying, more sharing and lending, more using resources twice or thrice, there are so many enormous opportunities if we get out of this crisis right. So crisis is a pain. It's horrible to many people, but it's also a fantastic opportunity to create a much better world.
Thank you, Eric. Yeah, I know in the Ayurvedic tradition in India, one has always said, what you focus on grows. So if we focus on all these positive opportunities that arise alongside with the catastrophic events, we can really make this increase. So it's a question of focus to a great extent. We continue with Pella Thiel, WWF Sweden's Environment Hero of the Year 2019 in the category Biodiversity. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Great to be here. I'm also part of global networks for rights of nature, where I was part of founding the Swedish branch of Rights of Nature and also the Transition Network. And I believe that this crisis, in a way, it was inevitable. There was no way of avoiding it. We have designed for it with growth and globalization and urbanization. And actually, business as usual hasn't been an option for decades. But it's like we couldn't help ourselves. We were like addicts who needed the help to take a pause, to take a break, to take time for reflection and maybe connection with what's really important. And in a way, I think the most important gift might be that we actually lose hope in things that we need to let go of, so that we can find hope somewhere else, and maybe that's closer to home than we thought. And as previous speakers said, there's already a lot of alternatives being created worldwide at the moment, alternative structures which respect the human connection with nature, but they're not visible and they're not seen as alternatives yet, until we realize that our old systems are failing us. So that's what I think that this crisis might give us.
Thank you, Pella. Yes, it's interesting in the world of Sri Sri Ravi Shankar and all those NGOs, people voluntarily go to retreats to get the time to reflect and to rediscover the true values of life and reconnect with yourself. And now the whole world is compelled to a quarantine. It's a completely unique situation that really offers a lot of opportunities. And we are lucky to have one of the strongest voices, spokespersons for the planet with us too, also from Sweden, but presently in Germany, Mr. Johan Rockström. Hello.
Yes, thanks. And unfortunately, my voice is a little bit weak today, but I hope it carries. And it's wonderful to be here. And I'd like to take on exactly where Sri Sri Ravi Shankar, your wonderful reflections on the beautiful rebounds of nature we're seeing right now, with cleaner airs and dolphins out of Mumbai. And you may have seen some of the science coming out in the Northern Hemisphere with the most recent estimates that we may actually reduce the number of premature deaths in Europe by 11,000 people who die each year of air pollution. 7 million people die each year worldwide because of indoor and outdoor pollution, because of burning of fossil fuel and unsustainable heating systems. We see that pure air and nature and ecosystems are bouncing back. Now, is that a good thing? Well, of course, it's a good thing, but it's not the solution. It is not the pathway towards a sustainable future that we need to have a virus pandemic hitting so hard that the global economy is shut down, jobs are lost, and misery is created. But it tells us something incredibly important, something incredibly powerful, which is exactly what Pella Thiel was indicating, that isn't it remarkable how we over 150 years have accepted that the only pathway to generate wealth and prosperity and development is at the cost of humans and the planet. I just find that to be just a remarkable reminder that the virus is now giving us this gift of showing us that, oh my God, this GDP growth-based paradigm is simply too costly. It is not acceptable, neither morally, nor health-wise, nor economically, to pursue this kind of development at the expense that it has caused us. And we are, as you know, approaching potentially irreversible, catastrophic thresholds that would place all future generations in a situation that we can call today a planetary emergency. So I think that is one important lesson from what we are facing right now. But what I find most important right at this moment is something which also has surprised me and many of my colleagues. I mean, all of us in this conversation saw the financial crisis 2008, we saw the tsunami, we've seen 9/11, we've seen so many of these shocks, and many times the voices were very clear. Let's learn. Let's not bounce back to the same world as before, the same vulnerable, unresilient, pre-crisis situation we had. But what did we do? We didn't learn. We bounced back and put the same vulnerable financial system as we had prior to the collapse in 2008. But now something is happening. We see as never before in the midst of this terrible health crisis, a mature debate on a green recovery. We see that in South Korea, we see it in Europe, we see it in China, we see it in many, many parts of the world, from business, policy, communities, science, being really open with this feel of unease that now is the time to recognize that we're not bouncing back to the old world. There's something new around the corner. Will we succeed? Well, it's still, the jury is out, but I have never experienced something as mature, as sincere and honest as what we're seeing right now. So I think there is hope.
Thank you, Johan. Well, the former Prime Minister Winston Churchill quote, he formed a very famous quote, "Never let a good crisis go to waste." And that's about what we're discussing right now. Jan Eliasson, you have met many crises, and of course this is rare and unique in that we all of a sudden have a common enemy all around the world. It's not between resolving countries against each other. How have you experienced that a crisis is really the opportunity to start something new? Jan Eliasson. Because I'm sure you have experienced that many times with the opportunities in the good crisis. It sounds maybe contradictory or even cynical, but could you give us an example of when it has really worked that way?
Am I unmuted now?
No, we hear you loud and clear.
Oh, good,
Thank
fine.
you.
Well, I think Johan Rockström is right in pointing to the unique nature of this pandemics. 2 or 3 months ago, hardly anyone spoke about it. We who fought the battle of being more active on climate change were feeling a state of hopelessness because we are at tipping points. But now this has been a reminder of the existential threat that we face on the climate change. So what we have to do now is to build a bridge between the pandemic's energy, so to speak, to the energy that we need for the climate change steps that are necessary. I have mostly spent time on mediating in conflicts and wars, 6 of them in the past. One time I came home and my daughter, she was only 13 at the time, she said, why do you sit down with these dictators, Saddam Hussein and others? Why don't you instead, Dad, negotiate peace with nature? And at that time, I smiled about it, but how right she was, because the basic understanding that we have to understand today is to realize that all human beings, everything that grows, every animal that lives are all interconnected. And we have in modern history utilized this to a horrible degree. And if we can sort of provide a philosophy and a policy of solidarity between human beings primarily, which is mostly lacking, but also between everything living. I think that's the road to go. But it's not going to be easy, because there are many forces in today's world that don't want to go back to the past, that want to divide and want to show the outside world as the problem, whether it is merchandise or ideas or human beings. So therefore, those of us who are coming to this conviction that we have to get the energy from the pandemics and do as much as possible to make the most vulnerable during this crisis, and it's certainly not over. If we can bring that energy and that mode of action to the climate change issue, then we have built a very important bridge. And last point is that we have a tool. Johan and I have worked with this, and also Eric, namely the Sustainable Development Goals. The SDGs are really the tool to repair the world, and also the program to reach the results, reach what we want with the Paris Agreement. Thank you.
Thank you. It's amazing to hear how you all are so aware of us being part of nature. I can't help quoting one of my favorites, history professor Chief Foreign Lyons, who always says, "How can you be an environmentalist? We are the environment." For indigenous people, it's very obvious that it's not us here and nature there, and we're not separate. We're all interconnected, interdependent in what they call the web of life, the whole web of life, where everybody can serve one another. But what is necessary then for us to understand that on a cellular level, so that we really can get the possibility to start living in harmony with nature? I know, Pelatil, you have been working a lot with these questions. What are your reflections?
Yeah, I think what we need is to remember that, what you said, Annika, to remember that we are part of nature, because we've forgotten in this culture, and we have even forgotten that we have forgotten. It's like we think that nature is a resource for us, and that's a fundamental misunderstanding of the Western culture, that idea that nature exists for human use, that it doesn't have any interests. Other species don't have interests of their own. It's like we are fish in the water. We don't know that we are swimming in the water because we are so used to that perception of the world. And when we live by that idea, we try to control and dominate nature, and we perceive it as a dead thing. And when we do that, we kill it, which is what we are doing today. And I think, as Sri said in the beginning, the world is full of good people. So within us, we know that this isn't true. Within us, we know that nature is alive, but our policies, our frameworks, our structures in this world doesn't support that, knowing that we have deep within. So I think that we really now need global guidelines to support that understanding, so that we can kind of stop governing nature. We can never govern nature. It's alive. We can govern ourselves in relationship to nature. And that's what Rights of Nature is doing. It's saying, yeah, humans have rights, fundamental rights, but all living beings have rights. And how can we respect those? How can we negotiate our existence in relationship with the rest of the living web? So actually, I think it's time to start the discussion to balance the UN Declaration of the Human Rights with the Declaration of the Rights of Nature. And this proposal is already ongoing since 10 years, and I think we really need to extend that debate. And we can all express support for that initiative of the rights of Mother Earth.
Thank you, Pella. Rebecca Lemoine, you work with this in the Parliament. Please tell us about that work.
Yeah, that's right. And I completely agree with Pelatil and what you say. and I am one of those who are really inspired of her, and that's has been resulting in me trying to now change the constitutional law in Sweden by putting a motion just recognizing and rewriting and adding that nature has its own legal rights in our constitutional law. And I think that this corona crisis also reminds us that this domination approach and lack of respect of our fellow species and nature will harm ourselves. Because, as you said, we are nature. And this can and must change. And an international law against environmental destruction, an ecocide law, can become true if we want to. Any of the parties of the Rome Statute can make a proposal to recognize ecocide as a criminal act. And if so, then starts a process that collects signatures from heads of state. For ecocide to be recognized, 82 states must say yes to this idea. And this is something that the trade union also are in favor for because of the human rights that has to be respected as well. And this is something that our former prime minister in Sweden was pushing for, Olof Palme, and there is also fighting for still. So I think this is a sign of how everything is connected and that we have to be more generous with legal rights because we are just one out of thousands, millions species in this world, but only human beings has legal rights today. So yes, I think there is a lot to do in the political world also.
Thank you, Rebecca. I just need to ask, are you, what is the reactions? Is this considered to be something extreme from your colleagues around in the parliament, or do you feel that this is growing as a concept?
I don't think it's extreme, but I think it's kind of rare to talk about our basic values. And I think that we have to start doing that. Because if we don't do that, we will just work like with symptoms all the time. And my party, the Green Party, we are pushing forward on this. And as I mentioned, the trade union are also in favor of this. So I think and hope that this discussion will really take form.
Thank you, Rebecca. Shri, what are you thinking about this connection with man and nature? How do you see how we can strengthen our understanding that we are part of a whole?
I mean, we are part of nature. You cannot be outside the nature. I mean, we are governed by the 5 elements: earth, water, fire, and air, and the life force that we have. I totally agree with Professor Johan Rockström that when he said, it's the challenge that we need to look after this COVID lockdown is over. What are the main challenges our society might face? One is fear. Though they might have found vaccine or the COVID virus has already been extinguished, but the fear in people's mind to go out, to meet with people, to mingle in society will all take a great toll on tourist industry, on transport, and many walks of life. The same thing can happen. Now, fear is something that can kill people even before they die. That is something we need to guard our society from. Second is the poverty that would become exponentially high. Here in India, we have our volunteer organization, all of us. We are supporting nearly 50 million people for everybody, their ration, their food during the lockdown period. It's 5 crore, we would say in India, 5 crore meals are being given. This is going to be a big issue. Tomorrow, so many people will lose job, especially daily wage workers. Others, anyway, they have their money, they have savings. But those daily wage workers who live hand to mouth, they are the one who will be very hard hit. At this time, there should be more humanness in society. and people should come out with their care and compassion. Of course, business is all down. For business to again restart, it takes some, but we need to balance business with human kindness. If we do these two things in the coming days, I think we will bounce back. Like, I think this is nothing short of World War III, where the entire World War went into some sort of depression. Now, this situation, we must see that people are mentally safe and sound, because the mental health is something we need to look into. In the society, on one side there is aggression, on the other side there is depression. So when people swing to depression, it is difficult. If they swing to aggression, it is even worse. So their inner peace need to be explored. This is the time through World Health Organization has already said depression is one of the biggest challenges that we will be facing in the coming decades. For that, we all have to work to kindle more compassion to all those who do not have a square meal, help out them, and then on the other hand, people who are in fear and anxiety and depression, to get them back to their normal self, where they have confidence, they have motivation, and they are able to live their life in a normal sense.
I know we have a tendency to look for outer measures to correct problems, like even military or social or economic or religious or forces or measures to try to fix things in the outer world, whereas you always advocate starting within to see that manifest outside. But of course, if you have proper famine, for instance, after this crisis, where people really, it's a survival issue, how can you reduce fear then and ask for them to find inner peace in that kind of desperation? How can we support our fellow humans around the world?
It is an inner phenomenon. It's not out there. Fear is the state of mind where you feel alone, you feel unsupported, and there is too much stress to handle. So here I would recommend them to look inside, some breathing exercise. It has clinically proven that breathing techniques and relaxation, meditation can help people to rekindle the confidence in themselves, find inner peace. If a person is peaceful inside, he is able to take any challenge. If inside is just troubled or ruffled, then he is unable to handle any situation. So mental health is very, very important thing at this point of crisis. Yeah.
Thank you. Erik Solheim, I understand that you have been then in Bangalore at the ashrams. How has that affected you? That's very exciting to hear. If you can resonate with what Sri is describing. Erik Solheim, there you are, yes.
Can you hear me now? Yeah.
Yes,
I think it basically affects you on the lines which she explained. I mean, there's no contradiction whatsoever between the inner and the outer. I mean, these are completely dependent on each other. If you have an inner peace but don't do anything for others, what is it worth? On the other hand, of course, the society around you in many ways decides what you will do. So inner and outer should be seen as one. Then we are full human beings. And I think that's, as I understand it, the message coming out of the beautiful ashram in Bangalore. But allow me to turn to the mother of all crises. I mean, the biggest crisis the humanity has ever faced, and that was the Second World War. We came out of that crisis much, much better than we were when we went into the crisis. Why? A lot of people started planning for the post-war crisis in the midst of the crisis. And President Roosevelt of the United States, well, he designed the United Nations, he designed the World Bank and International Monetary Fund, and it happened right in the midst of this all-out war against Japan and Germany. In Norway and Sweden, the pioneers of the labor movement basically designed what later became the welfare state in the midst of the crisis of the Second World War. And we need to do exactly the same now. We don't know how long this will last. It's the biggest crisis in the world since the Second World War. In the midst of these crises, we need to start the planning for the society we want to see after the crisis. And I believe there are two main counter forces which will make life difficult, as Johan Rockström spoke to. One is conflict between nations. At the end of the day, the most important in the world is the tension between the United States and China. And we need to do whatever we can to reduce these conflicts rather than amplify them. Don't listen to anyone speaking negatively about China. Don't listen to anyone speaking negatively about the United States of America. Let the rest of us do everything we can to bring these two nations together, because together, Europe, United States, India, China, we can achieve basically everything. If we are split and in conflict and isolated, we are in a very bad place. And the second is conflict within nations. If in Europe we were to see an all-out conflict between, say, the Green movement on one side and the populists, the right-wing extremists on the other, we will also be in a bad place. That's why we need to focus, we are the Green community, we need to focus on the win-win policies. All those policies which are fantastic for Mother Earth, while at the same time creating jobs and prosperity. Then we can bring the vast majority of the people with us in the change and transformation we need. Because the good news is that we are in that place. In India now, solar energy is cheaper in India than in any other place in the world. By far the cheapest energy you can go for in India. So the opportunity for India, for China, for Europe to transform ourselves out of this crisis is tremendous. But then we need to reach out and avoid conflicts. Just one final point. Sorry, I stopped there.
No, it's wonderful. I just want you to please elaborate a bit on that kind of visioning that Churchill and Roosevelt did in 1941 that gave birth to the United Nations and IMF and all that. How do you see that more concretely now? Where does it take place? Who are phrasing these new visions that will attract us to go a unified way as opposed to fight within ourselves?
At the moment, we are in a difficult place when it comes to the multilateral organizations. The United Nations is basically irrelevant in this crisis, has done nothing of any significance in the crisis. The World Health Organization is important. But the main issue is the relationship between the main powers. When you see some American leaders basically trying to create conflicts with China every single day, is very, very bad. And the Chinese will respond in the same way, and you will get into a very difficult situation. The rest of us, everyone else, we need to call for peace, call for cooperation, because if we cooperate and coordinate, we can achieve a lot. And Europe, India, China, and all the good forces in the United States, of course, can achieve this together with Africa, with Latin America, with everyone. I mean, the vast majority of humans want us to work together. And also to build on the rebounds of nature. I looked at this fantastic rebounds of nature, and some of you spoke about it. Penguins are now walking down the streets of Cape Town. There are jackals in Tel Aviv at night in the big parks. Turtles are nesting at the beaches in Thailand. Turtles were endangered, and American conservationists speak about the party of wildlife in the fantastic American national parks. And people want to see this also after the crisis. And it gives us a fantastic argument after the crisis to go out and mobilize people for a new and better future.
Thank you, Eric. I know Johan Rockström, you have been thinking a lot about this, that it cannot be the so-called environmentalists who carry on this road for the new future. We must find other incentives than internal fights between endless growth or green life. Please tell us how you are thinking about from where the change will come in the future.
Yes,
Johan
I think that's one of the big opportunities arising from this crisis, because we're all affected. We're all sitting more or less in semi or full quarantine around the world. And I think everyone is feeling uneasy, feeling that something is wrong. And science is very clear of what is wrong. The pandemic is a manifestation of the Anthropocene. It is de facto exactly
The
what.
Anthropocene, please explain that concept, the Anthropocene, for those who don't know.
So it's just to refer back to Rebecca and Pella, who made a very correct, scientifically supported statement that the pandemic is a manifestation. It sound, a bit shocking for many, but the fact is that the pandemic is a virus spillover from animals to humans. It's a zoonosis. We know that the zoonoses have actually increased in frequency over the last 20 years. We've all remember the SARS, the MERS, the swine flu, the bird flu. This is a representation of the new era, the new geological epoch, the Anthropocene, where we are, as humans, the largest dominant force of change on planet Earth. Not only that, we are undermining ecosystems, climate, and overexploiting biodiversity and forests. It also is that we are such a globalized, interconnected world, which can trigger these kind of, sudden occurrences at the local, in this case, most likely a spillover of viruses from bats to humans via hosts in a wet market of wildlife in Wuhan in China, and then propel itself across the world. Now, this fundamentally means that we can halt and reduce the risks of pandemics by reconnecting to nature, by taking care of ecosystems, stabilizing climate, builds resilience, and reduces risks in the future. I would argue that that is the fundamental recovery plan after the pandemic to accelerate our pathway towards a decarbonized, sustainable future. And as Jan already referred to, we have the Sustainable Development Goals, we have the Paris Agreement, we have the Convention on Biodiversity. It's a question of implementing them. So it's quite interesting that, the basic foundations of a more resilient, stable future are there. It's just that we haven't been able to get the rising in the momentum we need. But I think if you combine what Eric has been telling us so correctly, that the solutions are out there and they are not only available, but they're more attractive. And Pella and Rebecca's points about if you add the elements of responsibility and the, quite frankly, the legal obligations with Ravi Shankar's points about humanism, I think we have a perfect cocktail for a pathway that can take us towards a much safer, just, and sustainable, resilient future. Now, will that succeed? Well, it's still to be seen, but I come back to this point that we have so much evidence or so much indications that this is now becoming a much more, open part of the public discourse already now. So I think we're seeing a kind of a 1941 type moment right as we speak.
Thank you so much, Johan. Sri, you have been working so much in India and all over the world in doing just this with people who are in great stress, in violence, in disharmony, in depression, in aggression, and in prisons and elsewhere. And you have seen over and over again that it's possible to find balance and find harmony, and as long as you have a very clear vision. And we have a lot to learn from you in the East. You have thousands of years of traditions in how to balance our own systems and thereby affecting everybody else. How would you like to conclude how we can start living in nature thanks to this very crisis that's so painful for many, but that can be the spark for a new life?
Exactly what what Eric has mentioned. Eric Solheim has studied Sri Lanka, has studied here in Nepal, and has been working so hard. So all the way from Scandinavia, he came and he studied the people, their mindset, and you know, when you really go deep into the mindset of people, you can see that they are not bad people, they are good people, but they are wrong notions, wrong understanding, and sense of wanting to dominate. See, all this chaos that happens in the world, conflicts happen in the world, basically in the bottom of it, if you really go to the bottom of it, it is lack of understanding, lack of humanism. I won't say they lack humanism, they have it, but lack of expression of humanism. And they build wall between themselves, which is imaginary. And when someone comes as a mediator and talks to them, put them on a table, asking them to share their opinions, it makes a big difference. It makes a very big difference. So when greed takes over a person, a fear takes over a human psyche, they would do anything to destroy other human beings and destroy the nature as well. So if we need to be sensible and sensitive to the nature and be sensible to reasoning, then we need to attend to one's own level of education, one's own personality development, one's interaction with nature and other fellow human beings. So this sort of education, it seems is lacking, especially in the third world countries, in many parts of Africa, where you find conflicts again and again. In Central America, for example, you know, more lives are lost than Iraq war in Central America due to violence. So this tendency from violent tendency, you know, I don't say this is very natural to human beings. It is because of stressed mind and lack of broader vision. And even listening to all of you, all the panelists here with such broad idea and having that vision of, we live in a globalized society today. The world has become sort of one unit. It has always been one unit. Now the borders are not so relevant. See, this virus has taught us borders are irrelevant now. So we have to really care for human safety and security, both through putting laws and regulations in place about, you know, biological experiments that countries are doing in different parts of the world, as well kindling the humanness that is widely present in all human beings. In this way, we connect to nature, we connect to fellow human beings, we live a life of more peace and harmony, and we can bring more prosperity to our planet. Though it may appear to be an utopia or a dream sort of plan, but I think it is possible. We work towards it, I think we can get it, we can achieve it.
Thank you so much, Rishi, and thank you all the panelists for sharing your wisdom. I do wish us all the most breathtakingly beautiful growth into a reset for humanity with the governance that's worthy of the highest part of us. And I see the great potential with us all coming together. And those who would like to join the world meditation now, the daily with Sri Sri Ravi Shankar during this pandemic, can stay from 4 to 4:30 and just enjoying being in this nervous system of humanity from 140 countries. Thank you all for now.
Thank you, Annika.
Thank you.
Annika, on behalf of the World Forum for Ethics in Business, a big hand to you for conducting the panel so fantastically, and a big thank you to all our distinguished guests for being with us today for this important conversation. And Gurudev, thank you for your time. We will continue these think tanks on various important topics that we as a global community are dealing with today. So thank you very much.
So much. And today our team here is saying over 1 million people had joined our discussion today, and I'm sure you have all inspired them all to take things forward from here. Thank you once again, Anika and everyone. Bye.